everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're going to be talking about the 1957 Stanley Kubrick directed and co-written Paths of Glory. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K movie reviews, film reviews, TV reviews, video game reviews, tech reviews, we try and do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps out more than by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Paths of Glory came out in 1957, stars Kirk Douglas, and it just got a brand new Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray release. But before we dive into the review of that, I just want to talk about the film a little bit. So Stanley Kubrick is one of our greatest directors of all time. He directed 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut, some of the greatest films of all time. He did make some other films that seem to always get forgotten in your classic Stanley Kubrick conversations. I did a video a couple weeks on The Killing, that's another one, but Paths of Glory for me is actually ranked in his top 3 films of all time. For me, this top 3 are 2001, The Shining, and Paths of Glory. Paths of Glory is an anti-war film where Kirk Douglas plays a commanding officer of the 701st Infantry of the French Army during World War I against the German Army in 1916. Now that's kind of where the one big flaw for me of this movie is right out of the gate, is that Kirk Douglas and everybody else are playing French soldiers, but they are clearly very much American. They don't even try and change their accents.
You sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man. And you can go to hell before I apologize to you now or ever again.
They don't even try and change their speech patterns. It feels very much like this is the American Army, especially since it's 1957 and, you know, they're filming on sound stages, and it doesn't feel like they're in France in any sort of way. So that is the biggest flaw of this film, but it's also an issue of the time. It's 1957, so you can understand like the thought process for the time of making a film like this and just people using their regular American accents, because you got to remember you're trying to reach a wider audience, and the world was just a very different place. So I try and give it a pass on that, because that's something that would just never happen today. But I will admit that right out of the gate, when you first turn this film on and you're watching it, it can definitely be a little jarring, because Kirk Douglas, I mean, I've said this before, but it still blows my mind how much he sounds like his son Michael Douglas. They have the exact same voice, and they look very much similar to each other, so it really does feel like you're watching Mike Douglas, even though it's Kirk Douglas. It's just always been so fascinating to me that their speech pattern and speech delivery is almost exactly the same. But Paths of Glory, what makes the film so good is its actual message. This is an anti-war film, and it's just showing how the French army has an idea to take over an anthill. From the very beginning, it's being told to the most superior officer that we see in this film that this is a suicide mission, that it just cannot be done. George McCready plays one of the most menacing villains of all time, but in the very beginning of this movie, you could see him telling his commanding officer that it's not going to work, but because he holds a promotion in front of his face and getting one more star, he's like, alright, I'll do it, even though he knows that it's a losing battle. But they're going to send in somebody else to do this anyway, so he's going to go tell the person under him, who happens to be Kirk Douglas, that he has to go tell his men that they have to run in there and do this no matter what, even though Kirk Douglas makes it pretty clear to George McCready's character that there is no way that we can win this, it's impossible. But he's just spinning a thread and telling him, no, you guys will get it, we'll probably lose about 60-65% of our men, but that's still pretty good for taking over this anthill.
You know, you're saying that more than half my men will be killed.
And it just shows you how the thought process of the army is that, with war comes the loss of men, but they just put it on numbers. And it really also just feels like, to me watching this, just feels like any sort of job in general that I've ever experienced working, where upper management or the owners of a company get an idea, then their people that they pass it down to always say, I don't think that's going to work, but because the owner or the person in charge says that this is what we're going to do, they're going to do it anyway, even despite the fact that they are warned way ahead of time the possibilities of failure, they're still going to go through with it. So it just, basically it's like a cancer. It starts out with an idea and it just blows up into something that you could have never imagined it blowing up into, despite plenty of warning signs and despite numerous chances, get off the train and stop this before it gets really bad. It never happens, and eventually, in this film, it's the same thing. It gets passed on, and passed on, until eventually it's the time that we have to finally run in there and do this. We have to take over this anthill against the German army. We have no choice. Let's do it. And just like everyone suspected, it doesn't work. They're getting destroyed, they're getting killed, and now we have to come back, retreat, even despite George McCready's character saying you have to keep going, and he even at that point orders an attack on his own men because they're coming back. To him, he doesn't see these people as human beings. He just sees them as pawns in a bigger game. And that's disgusting, but that's basically why this is an anti-war film. It's showing that the negativities of war, it's that you're fighting a battle for somebody else. You're just a pawn in their big game. You're nothing more than that. And that's basically what they're trying to show you in this film. And this is filmed from 1957, so you can imagine that this definitely ruffled some feathers in the 50s. It was actually banned in a lot of countries from being viewed, including France. Then they all have to come back, and then that's what really leads into the amazingness of this film, is because they basically sit down in a big room, all these guys, and they say, okay, well, I want to kill 100 men, but I'll settle for 3. So they settle for 3 officers from each part of the 701st Infantry, and they just basically, some people pick them at random, some people have a vendetta against another person, and that's it. And then Kirk Douglas is assigned to defend them. But it's a court-martial case. They already have their decision in mind. It does not matter what Kirk Douglas says. Kirk Douglas points it out numerous times to his superiors that you're setting these guys up to fail. You don't even care about what I have to say. You don't let me call witnesses. You don't let me even give them a cross-examination without bringing up certain points. I have no way to actually defend these men, and it's all just favored into your positioning. And it really gets under your skin because you're just seeing the system fail in front of you, and Kirk Douglas pointing out every single flaw, but because of his position, he can't actually change the system, so he has to just go along with it to a point. He can definitely point out their flaws, but he doesn't want to step over that line and piss off the wrong person because, A, that'll end up getting him court-martialed and eventually, as we see, get him killed. Well, he doesn't get killed, but his soldiers, his men that he cares so much about. He actually is a human in basically a huge group of people who aren't human. There is just no humanity through these people. Kirk Douglas he's just trying to show these people that what you're talking about are human beings. The way that George McCready's character speaks of these people, he speaks of them almost like rats or just nothing to him. And it really is just unbelievable, and it just gets so frustrating. I'm watching this movie getting aggravated because I haven't experienced this through war, but I have experienced this in jobs where you're just trying to bring up okay, if you want to let this fail, let it fail. I don't care, but he does care. He doesn't want to see his men die, especially for something that he knew and he warned was a losing battle. He knew this was going to happen, and now you're punishing them for your failures. And that is just so aggravating and so frustrating. It really gets, and every time I watch this movie, it just blows my mind that even in 1957, all these years later, things still don't change. It's incredible what the system is. And that's what I believe this movie is trying to point out. Then they pick their 3 men, and in one of the most painful scenes that you'll ever see, these 3 men get tied up, and you think, okay, the first time you see these guys, they're gonna get out of this. There's gonna be some kind of last-ditch effort. They're not gonna kill these guys. That's not this kind of movie. But sure enough, in one of the most haunting scenes, they fire those guns and they blow these guys away, kill them, and they linger on that shot for a few seconds after they kill them, and just to drive home the power of it. And it really is one of the most powerful scenes you'll ever see. I can't sell this short that you have to see this film and its scenes. Now, the movie's not over there. We also shift into the next scene. Kirk Douglas's superior thinks that he was trying to get George McCready's job, that he actually didn't care about the soldiers, and Kirk Douglas says, no, I wanted my men to live. That's all I really wanted in the end. I did not care about a promotion. In fact, you could take your promotion and shove it where the sun don't shine because I don't care. That's not what I wanted. And they're just confused by it because they're just so used to people stabbing each other in the back to get what they want. They're not actually caring people, and they're surprised that Kirk Douglas himself is actually such a genuine human being. And honestly, they want to punish him for that. That's just the disgustingness of the whole thing. And then the ending, the very ending of this movie, back in the 50s, this got a lot of, from what I read, this was not a very acceptable ending, and I was reading what people thought of the ending, and they felt like it ended just on a dire note, and really they should have ended it when the soldiers died or the scene before it. But it's basically Kirk Douglas walking by a bar, and he hears all his men inside cheering and just acting crazy and just forgetting about what happened earlier in the day, and they're listening to a woman sing and she's crying and everything like that, and they're cheering and ruckus and just in a bar drinking, a bunch of men, that whole deal. But as the scene goes on, you see some guys in the crowd, their tears are running down their eyes. So it did affect them, but it's just that is war. You have to move on. What you saw, you almost have to turn yourself into a robot. You see the humans that they are, that the song is getting to them, they're crying, and for a moment, we see the humanity of these soldiers. So I'm confused as to why people didn't like this ending, or maybe you guys can tell me why you don't like this ending, but I thought the ending really tied into the whole significance of the film, which is that, you know, despite how you're trained, there's still a human being in there, and that human being, we can pull it out of you just because what you saw was a very human thing and a very disgusting act, and it shouldn't be something that should just be cast aside as nothing more than a symptom of war. Unfortunately, that's basically what the message of the film is, but I do think that this film is beautiful. I think it's a significant film. I think it's a film that actually still holds up and its message is still strong today. I think you should check this film out if you haven't seen it. I just saw this film in June, right? And I didn't even know that the 4K for this was announced by Kino Lorber. So I watched this in June on HBO Max, and then I saw that it was announced for 4K, and I was like, well, I'm grabbing that, because I try and get every Kubrick film on 4K. I think the only one I don't have now is Spartacus, which is significant. That's with Kirk Douglas too, but that's also the one movie that Kubrick didn't have complete control, and it's not one of my favorites. I'll eventually grab that, but I really do enjoy this film. It's a tremendous film. It's a 10 out of 10. It's one of my personal favorite Kubrick films. It's one that people seem to always forget about, and I really hope that people don't. I hope that this video opens people's eyes and goes and actually checks out Paths of Glory, because it's a film I really do think that is going to get an emotional reaction out of you. It is very strong, very powerful, and it's still significantly very well made. And speaking of very well made, let's shift into our Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray review. So Kino Lorber put out The Killing earlier in the year, which was also a Stanley Kubrick 4K, and just like that, it's in beautiful black and white with an amazing restoration. So this is using the original film negative transferred to a brand new 4K with Dolby Vision and HDR10 on it. And the Dolby Vision on this is unbelievable. Now, the black and white in The Killing was great. I think the black and white in this is even better. Now, actually, in the early scenes, there's some interior shots where I thought, oh, okay, I don't see a huge upgrade from the HBO Max stream I saw. But the second they go into the trenches, which is in the next location they shift to, and it's outside, that is where the black and white shine. That's where I was like, okay, now I see the upgrade. Now I see the deeper blacks. Now I see where the HDR and the Dolby Vision are really doing their work, is really in the outdoor trench scenes, mainly the war sequences, is really where you're going to notice the biggest upgrade in the HDR and the Dolby Vision and the resolution. Anytime they're outside. Now when they're inside, it might be a little bit less noticeable. Sometimes when the light is shining through the window, you'll be like, okay, that's a thing of beauty. But overall, the interior shots were definitely not as good as the exterior shots when you were transferring the film negative, but that's just a general from a source material standpoint. I still think that this entire film really has a huge upgrade with this Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray as far as visuals go, and that's where this shines, because audio-wise, you're just going to get a DTS 2.0 stereo sound. It's like I said with The Killing, it's a 1957 film. Don't expect more than that, even though it's a war film. You're not going to get those big, loud sounds coming from behind you or bullets screeching by you like you're watching Saving Private Ryan. That's not this kind of film. The war sequences in general, this is only an 88-minute film, so it doesn't take up a big, significant amount of the runtime. You know, this movie moves along at a very quick pace. They go through scene to scene to scene very fast. You know, where you're very used to, and we're very trained in 2022 for very long 3-hour movies or 2.5-hour movies, and the fact that Stanley Kubrick, who has made some very long movies, made an 88-minute movie, anti-war movie at that, and made it move at a very good pace and made you feel like you got a lot out of it, really does help this film a lot. And visually and audio-wise, just beautiful. Now, also, that brings us to extras, which is a little bit disappointing, just like in The Killing. All you're going to get really in here is one disc with one audio commentary track and the theatrical trailer. Pretty much the barest of bare bones as far as extras go. I would have loved some essays or a retrospective or the significance of this film, because this is one of the most significant films of all time in my opinion. So I would have loved like a full-fledged hour and a half documentary about the influence of this on other filmmakers, maybe some interviews, but we didn't get that here. It's kind of tough for me to say it's the greatest of packaging just because of that, but as far as the physical packaging goes, great slipcover. I do love the hints of orange in there. Kirk Douglas right on the cover. And underneath that, you get the same piece of art, just without the slipcover. I do, like I said, I like the slipcovers where they don't put the 4K Ultra HD logo on top of it, so I really do appreciate it when they do things like this. And yeah, it's great packaging. Kino Lorber usually always does some amazing packaging. They use their Kino Lorber standard disc print on top of that. You know, nothing crazy. It doesn't say Paths of Glory. Pretty bland. Nothing too special about the actual packaging. It's really the visual upgrade and keeping classic films alive, and that's what Kino Lorber does best. They are a studio who puts out plenty of classic films from the 40s and the 50s, even more modern films that might, like Out of Sight. That's a film that I love the 4K for. Kino Lorber did that. Just keeping these significant films that people did enjoy at the time that seem to get forgotten in people's filmography, like this is a Stanley Kubrick film. A lot of people seem to forget about it. Same thing with The Killing. But now you can grab them in beautiful 4K. And that's just a testament to Kino Lorber and the work they do. They are becoming one of my favorite boutique studios. I love their work. I love classic film. So for me to go back and watch this in beautiful 4K, it really is just tremendous. Overall, if I'm going to grade this entire thing based on the film, the packaging, the extras, the visuals, the audio, I'm going to give this a solid 8.5 out of 10. The lack of extras really did kind of bother me a little bit, but this is a 10 out of 10 film. Visually, it's stunning. If you can grab this film, like I said, it's streaming in a lot of places, so you can watch that on there if you don't want to get this 4K upgrade, if you don't care about that, if you just want to watch a good classic film. I watched this on HBO Max in June. No problem with doing that. But if you are a huge Stanley Kubrick fan and you're like me and you want to complete your Stanley Kubrick collection and you want the highest quality that you could possibly get, this Kino Lorber 4K is that for you. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining me here on another episode of Let's Talk. Nothing helps out more than by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And then I want you guys to all go out and tell all your friends.